All right. Looks like everybody's here. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We have Leslie Greenwood here from UF Law to speak to you all about personal statements. I'm going to go ahead and let her take it away. Go ahead. Thank you. Oh, Leslie, I think you're muted.
Yep, I saw. Thank you. I appreciate it. My name's Leslie Greenwood. I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions at the University of Florida, Levin College of Law, and really happy to be talking about this topic of personal statements and refining your personal statements today. It's a topic that I do think causes students a lot of anxiety. I think it's a topic that students have a lot of questions about. Perhaps they don't even know where to start, or if they're going too far or not far enough, or what they should be including. So hopefully today's presentation will give you a little bit of guidance and general advice about what may be better or worse. There's no one right answer to personal statements, which is why I also think makes it really hard for students. But regardless, we'll start out today with a little bit of a brief UF Law overview, just brief, just a few minutes, so you can learn a little bit about UF Law, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation of the personal statement do's and don'ts. And then finally, we'll open it up for Q&A, and Priya will help me get some of those questions out of the chat, or people can raise their hands, right, Priya? Good.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. So again, this is a brief rundown about UF Law. I promise you I have much more to say than this, but I will keep it short. UF Law provides an exceptional value for outstanding opportunities. We have a strong national reputation. We have proven outcomes. We have fantastic experiential learning opportunities available. We have a very strong and vast alumni network in Florida and beyond. And we place a very strong emphasis on student support. So first of all, our strong national reputation. We are Florida's flagship law school, which means that we are a state institution, but we are the one that got the land grant from the state of Florida for our institution. And we've been around for the longest of the state institutions. So we're the oldest public school, state law school in Florida. We are the number 23rd ranked law school in the 2025 top law schools by Above the Law, which focuses a lot on outcomes. And I'll get to that in just a minute. But another thing, people always ask us, what does UF Law specialize in? Well, I won't say that we actually specialize in any given area of the law, because you could come to UF Law and really learn a lot of different subject areas. So you are definitely not pigeonholed into one subject area when you come to UF Law, and you have the opportunity to explore. But that said, we do have a very strong tax law program. It's the #1 public tax law program in the country, the #2 tax law program overall. So if you are into accounting, or if you are into any sort of business or finance, or want to do anything related to wills or trust and estates, those areas are going to be really strong here because we have such a strong tax law faculty. And then we have 4 other areas of the law that are ranked in the public top 10, which are business and corporate law, constitutional law, contracts and commercial law, and dispute resolution. So again, we have a very strong doctrinal program for you, no matter what area of the law basically you want to go into. So we also have a very strong proven outcomes. We have the #1 bar pass rate in the state of Florida, which is something that we're incredibly proud of at UF Law. We also have the 100% bar pass rates in DC, Georgia, Illinois, and North Carolina. So I know those are really popular markets and jurisdictions where students who come to UF Law may want to practice ultimately. So that proves that our students not only do well in Florida, but they also do well outside the state. In fact, our students took the bar in 20 different jurisdictions last year. So really, UF Law does have a national reach. We have very strong employment numbers. 97.3% of our grads are employed within 10 months of graduation. And we have a very robust OCI program, which is on-campus interviewing. We have over 600 employers that participate in our OCI. So if you're looking to get a summer position, look no further. UF Law can definitely help you in that endeavor. And we are ranked the #20 go-to law school for big law employment. So if you're looking to go into big law, we have strong background and connections there, as well as the number 20 law school overall for law firm employment. So law firms of any size, we're also ranked number 20. So even if you want to go into a smaller practice, that is absolutely cool. We have the option for you to do that as well, and very strong placement in that. And overall, we have the number 3 best salary to debt ratio of any law school in the country, which means that not only do our students not take out very many loans because of our very affordable cost of attendance, we also have salaries that our students get in their jobs that would allow you to pay back whatever loans you do have to take out for, say, living expenses while you're here. So again, you'll be more easily able to pay back those loans per this statistic. So we also have strong experiential learning opportunities. Experiential learning opportunities are opportunities that are outside the traditional format of a lecture hall classroom taking notes with the professor lecturing, right? So these are different sorts of opportunities that allow you to gain skills that will be transferable to whatever you want to do when you graduate. So we have 11 clinics and field placements. Clinics are representing clients who are unable to otherwise afford legal services. And we also have field placements. Those are the same thing, but they're just done outside the law school. So clinics are done in an office at the law school. You'll see right there in the picture, the experiential learning hub is where the clinics are located in the law school. But the field placements are the same thing. There's just several of them that take place at the state attorney's office or the public defender's office in Gainesville. Second, we have an externship program, which is just doing an internship essentially for credit. Semester in practice is the opportunity for a second semester, third year student to practice anywhere in the world. If you have a qualifying internship anywhere in the world, you can do that for credit and finish out your law school credits by doing that work for that semester. We have a pro bono requirement that requires you to do 40 hours of pro bono legal work before you graduate. And then finally, we have simulation courses, which are courses where you get the opportunity to practice legal skills, just not on a real case like in a clinic. So a simulation course might be say, like negotiation, where you're negotiating a fake case, but you're still negotiating it with your peer in your class, and you get evaluated on that negotiation. We have an extremely strong alumni network that's otherwise known as Gator Nation. But Gator Nation is the entirety of the 500,000 living alums that have graduated from UF in general. But the law school itself has a little over or on nearly 23,000 living alums. We have been around for 116 years at UF Law. So again, we have a strong tradition. Whoops, something fell off of my computer. Sorry. We have a very strong tradition of leadership because we've been around for so long. So we have a very strong presence in the state of Florida. Our alums practice in 50 states and 60 countries. 2/3 of our alums are in Florida, and the other third of our alums are outside of Florida. And outside of Florida, our strongest concentration of alums are in Atlanta, DC, and New York City. So of course, we have people practicing all over the country, but you'll find a strong concentration of alums in those 3 cities. We really put a strong support on student support and wellness as well. We've put a lot of resources into that over the last few years, and that is really helpful to our students in creating an environment where they can learn and thrive at the same time. So we have a extremely low student faculty ratio of 4.9 to 1. We have less than 75 students in each one of your 1L sections, and less than 780 students in total. So we consider ourselves a small to medium-sized law school. We have a full-time dedicated mental health counselor at the law school, which is great because they're very aware of the unique stressors and circumstances that law students face. And so they're better able to assist you than maybe, say, a general mental health counselor or someone across campus. We have an Office of Career and Professional Development where every one of the advisors is a JD. So they've all gone to law school. They've also all practiced law. So they do know what it takes to succeed as a law student and as a legal professional. We've really invested in our academic success team and grown that part of the law school over the last few years. Our academic success team now supports students from the time before they even enter law school all the way through the time past graduation and into their bar prep in the summer after they graduate. So that's a nice resource to have all throughout your time, not only for success in classes, but beyond on the bar exam. And then finally, we have extensive university resources here at UF that you're able to take advantage of. So one last thing, I mentioned at the first, we have outstanding opportunities, and we do. We have, I just mentioned a lot of those to you and very quickly, but I didn't mention the exceptional value part. And so to understand the exceptional value, you have to understand cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is the big figure of attending law school for a 9-month academic year that includes all those things below. Don't stop your evaluation at tuition and fees. Look at the total cost of attendance, including all of your living expenses, because that's what really you're going to have to think about paying when you're thinking about going to law school. This is UF Law's cost of attendance. I would imagine most of you, being at UCF, are Florida residents. And so you can look at that first column there to see what your all-in cost of attendance would be. At UF Law, your cost of attendance would be $48,770 as a Florida resident each academic year. And then you'll see how this stacks up to some other types of schools. These are sort of generic, these are averages. But you'll see here that this is our cost of attendance in comparison to some other competitor institutions where a lot of our students overlap in applications. And you'll see that UF is way down there on the left, especially the resident one is the orange bar. You'll see that it's so much lower than even other states' in-state tuitions, or sorry, in-state cost of attendances for their students. So we in the state of Florida are incredibly lucky to have the support of the state and be able to offer a cost of attendance that low for our Florida residents in particular. But even for our non-residents, the blue bar, it's still lower than a lower cost of attendance than the vast majority of the other competitor schools, even for in-state residents. So, and you'll see I've circled the number, the $50,000 here. $50,000 marks where the new federal loan caps that are taking effect this July are going to limit your borrowing. So you'll see as Florida residents, you're very lucky again, because our cost of attendance comes in just below that $50,000 mark. So if you're looking to attend law school and did need to borrow every single penny to attend law school, you could do that with federal loans at UF Law. At these other institutions, of course, you'll see they way exceed $50,000 a year cost of attendance. So you're either going to have to pay that out of pocket somehow if you're independently wealthy, or you're going to have to dip into private loans, which brings out a whole other host of issues with, perhaps predatory practices, variable interest rates based on your credit checks, needing co-signers. There's a lot of issues that go along with getting private loans versus federal loans. So again, it's far preferable to be able to stay just within that 50,000 and stick with federal loans if needed. This is our class of 2028 profile, our current 1Ls. So all this stuff is available online, but I thought I'd just show it to you so you can see approximately where our credentials are this past year. Now, that does not mean that this year our credentials are going to be the same or that our number of applications is going to be the same, but this is just as a point of reference for our current 1L class and where we are statistically. All right, so now into the meat of the presentation, the personal statement do's and don'ts. I'm really excited again to talk about this, and so is this girl. She's really excited because she loves her personal statement. She's really happy about it because she's done some of these do's. So number 1 do, stay focused on a clear narrative. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about what that means. So try to stay focused on 1 or maybe 2 incidents or experiences that have really impacted your desire to want to pursue law. It's easier said than done. Most people want to there's a tendency to want to throw in everything but the kitchen sink into your personal statement. I want to do law for this reason and this reason and this reason. And starting all the way back when I was a baby, my mom told me I liked to cry because I was arguing or whatever. So all of these things, people try to throw in their personal statement, every possible thing that could have ever led them to want to practice law, but that's not really effective. It's really more effective to pick one or maybe two incidents or experiences and really expand upon those and then tie that back to why you want to go to law school. Bonus points for when I say clear narrative, if you stay on track with that and don't bounce back and forth between the two things that you chose either, because that's confusing for the reader and sort of, sometimes students start on a path of telling a story and you're like, yeah, this is really great. And then they'll just flip to another one. And then maybe they come back to the other one at the very end and try to tie it all together, but it kind of never got fully developed. So again, try to develop one or two incidents or experiences that led you to want to practice law. And again, a narrative too can be created throughout your application. So let's say you're a STEM major, right? And let's say that your letters of recommendation say you want to practice patent law, and you say all of a sudden in your personal statement that you want to do civil rights law. It's like, well, where did that come from? Like, that has nothing to do with anything else the rest of the application. So it's not only a narrative within the personal statement, but it's a narrative throughout your entire application that should sort of be woven with the things that we're seeing on, your resume, your major, maybe letters of recommendation, etc. I did come across one letter of recommendation recently that said that the applicant wanted to practice a particular type of law. And when asked in an interview about that, because something, in the personal statement was said that was completely different, the person said, oh yeah, I'm not interested in that anymore. So that's not necessarily the greatest thing that you want to convey to the committee, is that, 2 months ago, you were all of a sudden interested in one thing, and then now you're just like, not anymore. So try to keep that clear narrative, I think, is important. Okay, point 2 here. Second do. Maintain a clear and professional tone and structure. So this sort of goes back to focusing on a clear narrative, but I think, staying clear in your personal statement and the message that you're trying to convey about yourself and your whatever incident or experience you're trying to explain is best, right? The more things you add in, the muddier the water gets. And so the narrative gets confused. I think as far as being professional, I think what I mean there is a little bit more about creativity in your personal statement. I think there's a desire to want to stand out and have your personal statements stand out. But I think that sometimes standing out is not the best technique. In fact, in a way, it's better to ensure that you maintain a professional tone throughout all of your written submissions, instead of trying to do something unique and innovative in your personal statement. For instance, one personal statement that I read had a dialogue between robots during the apocalypse. That has nothing to do with you wanting to go to law school. So while unique, and I remembered it, it was not in a positive way. So I do, and again, you don't know who's reading your personal statement. You have a committee of folks who could possibly be looking at this personal statement, and you don't necessarily know their sense of humor or if they're going to get what you're trying to get across. I've had poetry in a personal statement. That wasn't quite, didn't quite land, I think, in the way that they anticipated that it would land either. So again, I remember the poetry, but that doesn't tell me about who that person is necessarily. So again, you don't know who's reading your personal statement. You want to make sure that you stay calm also, as far as professional tone. I've seen people get really passionate about, and I think they think that they're conveying passion for advocacy and passion for a cause. And that can be true, but there's a very thin line between passion and getting a little bit too wrapped up in the cause and not conveying things about who you are, right? This is all about you, and for the committee to get to know more about you, not the merits of an argument on an issue. And then finally, the structure I do want to address. I think this is more common these days because students read things on websites, and websites don't always necessarily follow proper structure, like paragraph structure. So I've read personal statements that are just one long paragraph for 2 pages or 2.5 pages long. There's no such paragraph that should be 2.5 pages long in this. So remember, structure, go back to middle school grammar, a topic, discuss it, and then conclusion, right? There should be sort of clear structure to your statement, not just a rambling on, like just random thoughts, just kind of put down on paper. So think about how you're going to organize your ideas in a clear way that's appropriate, like grammar-wise as well. Okay. 3, shows and not tells characteristics about you as a person. So this is a kind of a couple lessons combined. First, we do get a lot of students who are very eager to tell us why you're going to be a great law student. I'm organized and I'm professional and I love to live in the gray and I love all this kind of stuff. They tell us these characteristics. But it's much more effective if you are telling us a story about an experience or an incident, and those characteristics are evident in that story. So for instance, one personal statement that always stands out to me is, in a good way, this time, is a student that worked at a store for 8 years prior to applying to law school. They worked there all through high school and all through college consistently. This wasn't a fancy job. This wasn't a fancy internship. This was, a company we all know and love, but, it was just a very regular job that you could get as a high school student. And so this person, through their explanation of their job at this place, was demonstrating things like diligence, responsibility, maturity, open-mindedness, things like that. And they didn't once say, I am open-minded. I am diligent. I am persistent. I am reliable. That was never words that were spoken in the personal statement. But these were things that the committee could infer by the experience that this person was telling us about. So again, showing us, not telling explicitly these characteristics about yourself are much more effective. And by the way, just come off a lot nicer. Because instead it's like a brag to be like, I am so smart. You would not say that anyway, but you wouldn't say, I am so responsible. It's way better to show the incident about how responsible you've been over the course of 8 years, right? And then the next part of this is about you. And I put the emphasis on you because there are personal statements where students tend to want to tell us about somebody meaningful in their life that's caused them to want to pursue law. Maybe it's your grandfather who was a judge. Maybe it's your grandmother who was an immigrant and helped raise you. Whoever that was, they may very well have had that big impact on you. And it's fine to mention them. And it's fine, maybe a sentence or two about that person. But you have to remember that this personal statement is supposed to be about you. This is not an ode to that other person. This is about you and the characteristics that you have and the traits that you're going to bring to this and the reason why you want to do this. So just keep that in mind. Yes, maybe the fact that your grandma would be proud of you is a reason why you want to go to law school. Perhaps maybe not the most persuasive though, right? Because that's an external motivator. That's not something inside of you that's driving you to want to do this. Okay. Connect it back to why law is the 4th do. So sometimes we'll see students that tell a wonderful story and then just don't tell us why they want to go to law school. And so that whole great story, it's like, okay, great, now what? So like, so what? Like, that's fantastic that happened, or that's interesting that that happened. You sound like an interesting person, but they forget to take it to that final step of why law. And that can be your final paragraph, right? That doesn't have to take up the entire statement. That can be just one paragraph about, all of these things, blah, 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 this leads me to want to do this. And I think a lot of times students can confuse the why law they confuse it with having to know exactly what they want to do when they graduate. That's absolutely not the case. So you don't need to tell in your personal statement, I want to practice at a mid-sized firm in Orlando that does civil litigation in small business matters. Like, you don't need to know that yet, for sure. You really just need to know sort of the more general motivators. Now, if you do know something more specific, like, hey, I'm a STEM major, I want to utilize my scientific background in the law and practice patent law, that's fine. Like, that's fine enough. That totally makes sense. But again, you don't have to go that next level of so specific about exactly what you want to practice. So last due, ensure your why law school is consistent with other parts of your application. I did touch on that a little bit about weaving a narrative throughout your application. So again, we have seen people who tell us one thing in one part of the application and then switch it over in their personal statement. Or another thing that we see is that in the YUF statement, they'll say an area of the law that we offer, or like, let's say tax law, because it's our number one ranked area of study. So they want to say tax law is their interest, but all the rest of the application doesn't have anything to do with tax law, like the major, letter of recommendation, the personal statement, nothing has anything to do with tax law. And then the YUF has to do with tax law. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. It really doesn't come off as very genuine. So try to stay consistent throughout the rest of your application, personal statement included. Okay, on to the don'ts. And this guy obviously does not like personal statements. He's very frustrated about writing it. I know this is how some people feel when they're writing the personal statement, because they don't really know what to write or they don't know how to do it. So I think following some of these don'ts will be helpful. So first, don't rehash your resume. I think that's a really common pitfall to get into. And because everyone wants to show all these great things they've done. But I promise you, the committee is reading your resume. They're looking at it very thoroughly. So you do not need to rehash your resume because it's not telling me anything about you that I don't already know. So if you want to take one of your experiences from your resume and really expand upon that, like, let's say on your resume, you interned at the district attorney's office, which is a common internship. They like interns, and it's a fun internship because it has something to do with criminal law. It's a really great thing. So if you're interested in that, I do encourage you to try to intern with the DA's office, or I think state attorney's office technically is what it's called here. So if you're at the state attorney's office, you don't need to write that like, I want to practice law because I interned at the state attorney's office and it was so great and I learned so much and it really reemphasized my desire to practice law. Like, that doesn't say anything about who you are. That just says you had an internship at the state attorney's office, which we already knew. So instead of that, maybe think of a case that you worked on. Okay, and really expand upon that case. And again, you're not talking about that case so much, you're talking about things you did, right? Your professional skills, your experiences, your feelings, your impressions about that case or incident that happened while you were interning there. So it's not that you can't write about things that are on your resume, it's just that you don't need to rehash all of them. And I would just pick something that's maybe the most meaningful from your resume and really expand upon that. Okay. Second, don't lecture or opine about the law or public policy. And I think sometimes students think they're doing themselves a favor when they go into depth or they're trying to show depth of their knowledge about a legal issue. And perhaps this is because they wrote a paper on it, or maybe this is because they took a pre-law law class in undergrad. and they learned about a particular body of law and they think, okay, I'm an expert now. But unfortunately, at pre-law stage, you're not an expert in any area of the law. And even if you've lived it, even if you've, taken a pre-law class on it, or even if you've written a paper on it, that does not necessarily mean you are an expert, because there's always going to be people who know more at the law school level than you do, or who are practicing law. So it comes off a little bit, perhaps maybe even a little bit immature, or maybe a lack of self-awareness when you start to do that in your personal statement. Like, what does this kid think they know, right? And it's not necessarily true. You may be very well versed in it, but it can come off the wrong way to people who read your application. Because remember, you don't know who's reading your application. Maybe the person who's reading your application is literally a forefront expert on that field. And you're trying to come off like you know so much about it, and you're 22 years old or something. So it doesn't necessarily come off the right way. I think also spending valuable real estate in your personal statement, talking about laws or a body of law, or talking about an opinion or a history on public policy isn't doing you a lot of favors either, because you're giving up valuable real estate to talk about you and show who you are. So I think that isn't always the best use of your space. Don't number 3. So don't get too specific about what type of law you want to pursue. And I did kind of mention that on the last slide. You don't need to get too specific. And I saw one personal statement that got really, really specific about a type of law that I have barely even heard of. And certainly not one that we specialize in any way here, or that we offer any classes in, because it was very, very specific. And so it kind of led the committee maybe to think that that person wasn't necessarily a good fit for the school, because they had gone so much into how passionate they were about this very specific niche area of the law. But if it's something that we don't offer, or something that they're not going to do here, it kind of makes it seem like the person may not be the best fit for the school. So if you're really going to get specific, definitely don't do so in an area that the school doesn't offer, because that's, doesn't show awareness or tailoring the application to that specific school or anything. Okay, don't try too hard to impress with complexity. This is one that we see with students that try to use big words. For lack of a better word. They're trying to make it sound like they are very sophisticated and educated, and have a great vocabulary and smart and all of these things. And there's no doubt that you are. I'm sure that you are, but it comes off unnatural when you try to utilize words and sentence structures that are too complex. Now, I want to contrast that with, I also don't think that you should be too informal or too familiar in your tone either, because that goes back to the professionalism in your tone, which was one of the do's, right? So we do want to be professional, but there's a fine line between being professional and then trying to sound like you're sort of being too complex or unnecessarily wordy, if that makes sense. So I've seen a lot of usage errors where students will utilize a word that sounds the same as the correct word, but they've utilized the wrong word. And it's a big word. So they think it's something they wouldn't normally use, or don't really know how to spell correctly. So again, that's a huge red flag when you see that. It looks like they're trying too hard and not in a good way. They should have just tried to stay with, language that they're comfortable using. And I'm not saying something you would text to your friend, like that's not what I want either, but somewhere in between. Trying too hard and texting with your friend is a nice medium of natural language that you can use, that you feel comfortable with, that conveys your message accurately. And finally, don't ignore basic writing quality. So that goes a little bit with the last one as well. But again, basic grammar is very important. I see a lot of incomplete sentences. And I think people may think that they're doing it for, creative impact. But again, being creative this isn't really the place for that. So I wouldn't necessarily utilize incomplete sentences. If you're using quotes of someone, make sure you know how to quote what somebody says appropriately. Like my grandmother said, comma, quote this, right? So don't, and there's supposed to be new paragraphs for these things too. So there's basic structure things that make it really hard to read if you don't follow them. It's like, are they trying to be creative with it, or do they just not know that that's an incomplete sentence? And it's hard to tell. And I think there's a lot said about AI too, about like, oh, do people run things through AI to make their writing better or worse, or like, I don't know, or just to run it through AI. We require that yours be your own work. That's what we say in the application certification. We don't specifically note AI, but it has to be your own work. You can have somebody else look at it, like a mentor, a friend, a family member. They can look at it and give comments, but they shouldn't be going line by line and scratching things out and redlining your draft. It's more to get feedback about what seemed to work, what didn't, or this seemed a little bit complicated, or I think maybe you could organize this a little bit better, or go into more detail here. That's the kind of feedback that is more appropriate. And they can also give you feedback on basic writing quality. Like I saw a lot of spelling errors, or I saw a lot of grammatical errors, or hey, this is all one long paragraph. Do you think you could maybe break up your ideas a little bit? So all those things are things that people could help you with as well, if you're not necessarily strong in that category. Okay, so questions.
Students, you can go ahead and put your questions into the chat, or you can feel free to unmute as well.
Don't be shy, I promise. I do see some questions in the chat, I think, or maybe. Oh, that was regarding the check-in, sorry. Any questions about personal statements? I know it's tough. I did do a series of Instagram posts, which is why I put this like at UF Law admissions down at the bottom, because I did give some tips on personal statements on the Instagram. I did like a 5-part series this fall about it. I'm sure I'll do another 5-part series about it in the spring or late, probably before next application cycle, probably not this spring, but yeah, so make sure and follow us there too. Oh, thanks, Brianna. I appreciate it. I hope it was. I hope it was helpful.
Well, while maybe the students are coming up with questions, I can ask you some questions we've had in the past.
Sure, yeah.
So we've definitely had questions before about how do you pick what narratives to put into your personal statement, or how do you pick what memories or stories students have from their own life to kind of showcase what skills they have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so the example that I gave, which was the person working at a store, right? That in and of itself is not necessarily like an impressive job, right? It's a job anyone can get. It's, your local store. So it's not like anything that in and of itself, the incident has to be impressive, or the experience has to be impressive necessarily. It's really just about how you write it and about how you develop that idea. So this particular person worked at a store and talked about, the sort of different responsibilities they had and how they interacted with strangers and how they were required to problem solve and how they were required to, show up during the pandemic and, that kind of stuff. So like there is some stuff in there that like, again, I think if you just told your friend, about, this is my experience working at a store, it doesn't sound super impressive in and of itself, but it's the lessons that that person learned and how that person grew in that experience and how they described it that really made it impressive. So I think it is hard to pick something like that, but I think you just have to think of something that's kind of formative. Like what's been formative for you? Maybe it's I've seen personal statements about students who are in student government, by contrast, not a professional work experience, but who are in student government, and they were talking about how they really wanted to get a particular initiative passed, and they go into detail about how they worked with others and tried to compromise on the wording with other people who were against it and tried to, spread the word and all that kind of stuff. So again, just a student government initiative in and of itself is like, there's a lot of student government initiatives. There's a lot of student organizations out there, but it showed that this person, it showed a lot about that person's character and the skills. Remember, it showed us, it didn't tell us what that person's skills and aptitude were. But then they were able to tie that back to why they want to go to law school, because they want to work, with others to achieve common policy goals, So it made a lot of sense. So I think that, there's a lot of things you could write about, but maybe try to think of one that you can really show yourself and develop, and how your characteristics, and then also ties back to why law.
Thank you so much. That definitely helps make it clearer. And along those same lines, somebody was asking what conveys authenticity in a personal statement.
Well, I think what I said about the language does convey authenticity to some degree. Like, I don't want it to sound like you're texting your friend. That would be like too authentic. But at the same time, language that seems natural to you, that is one thing that can convey authenticity, is the right language. I think you also don't need to think of, going back to that same example about working at a store, it doesn't have to be this grandiose experience. It doesn't have to be tragedy. It doesn't have to be overcoming some amazing, huge obstacle. It can just be kind of an everyday thing. But it's really how you present that everyday thing that makes it different and unique and impactful. So I think that when I was a law student, I think that was probably my biggest mistake, is thinking that I had to have some, really outstanding incident or thing that happened to me that I had to write about. And I'm like, I'm boring. I don't have anything that was that crazy. So, but you don't really have to have that. And that can be very authentic, to just pick an everyday type of incident rather than trying to, I won't say make up, but trying to like really embellish something to make it outstanding.
Thank you. And then we also had a question. How long should personal statements be? The student said that you previously mentioned that 1 to 2 pages with structured paragraphs, but they wanted to be sure.
Yes, at UF Law, it's definitely 2 pages double spaced is what we recommend. Now, of course, if you went a couple lines over on the other page, it's not like the committee's just going to stop reading it. Of course, they're going to read the whole thing. But the reason why it's 2 pages double spaced is because it also shows your ability, number one, to follow instructions, but number two, and read instructions, but also it shows your ability to develop an idea within strict parameters. It's much easier, or it can be easier, if you can kind of go on and on about something and to finally develop it. But to be concise and to be able to develop an idea in that short amount of real estate that you have, I do think that that's a skill. And it's a skill that you'll need to use as a lawyer when you're writing briefs. Let's say an appellate brief has a very strict page limit, and there could be thousands of pages of, deposition transcripts and evidence and everything else. And here you are having to write a brief to consolidate all of that to just the most salient points. And that's kind of what you have to do here in a different way. So it's showing a skill that you will have to use when you're a lawyer. So it's not just because the committee doesn't want to read more than 2 pages, it's because you should be able to do this within 2 pages and leave us with something that, is memorable.
Thank you, and that makes sense. You need to be able to craft your argument. So we had another question as well. What type of specific characteristics do you look for in a person when you read a personal statement? And the person
Oh,
had
yeah.
some examples, like, are you looking for that they're great with teamwork, or if they've worked at a store for 8 years, showing stability and good at following instructions?
Yeah, I mean, all the above can be positive, right? It's all about how you kind of spin it. I mean, I think that in general, when as part of the holistic review committee, our committee is looking for, generally the holistic review is the ability to succeed in law school and beyond. And so that can mean a lot of things. It can mean maturity, it can mean dependability, it can mean persistence. It can mean diligence. It can mean creativity. It can, not necessarily poetry or robot dialogue, but creativity in a different way, like a creative solution to a problem at with a student organization that you're on the leadership of or something, right? That's the type of creativity I'm talking about. Or it could mean a lot of different things. So yes, and working with others can definitely be a characteristic that they're looking for too. So you mentioned teamwork specifically. Yeah, I think your ability to interact with others, especially nowadays, that's a skill that a lot of younger people struggle with because of technology and phones. And so interacting and connecting with others and bridging gaps and things like that, those are all positive qualities that would be looked for.
Thank you. Students, are there any other questions? And then maybe while they come up with that, is there a good email that students can reach out to as well?
Sure, absolutely. Let's see. There we are. That's my email in the chat.
Thank you so much. And we did have another question come in. So a student was asking, if you can choose only one quality as the most important aspect of a personal statement, which one would it be? While all aspects are important, they're interested in hearing your specific response.
The most important aspect of a personal statement. I mean, again, overall writing skills are really important. So maybe you weren't the most exciting incident. Maybe you don't have the most persuasive argument as to why you want to go to law school. But the fact that you could put together 2 pages that are well written, that make sense in structure, have the appropriate tone, were professional and cordial throughout, like those things matter. So I think that, general writing, because yes, we're judging the content when we're looking at your file and we're looking at your personal statement, but we're also looking for skills, like writing skills in all of your written submissions. And that includes personal statement. If you do a YUF, if you have to write an addendum about something, your writing skills throughout every written submission are definitely looked at. So don't throw it away. Don't be sloppy. The writing skills themselves are actually probably even more important than the content to some degree.
Thank you so much. Students, are there any other questions? Well, while I don't see any coming up, I just want to say thank you again, Leslie, for putting on this presentation. The information was so detailed. I think it provided everybody with a lot of questions that they had been curious about. So thank you so much.
Good. Thank you so much, Priya. And thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. Good luck on your personal statements.